is saying that he has an appointment conflict. So I think we have a quorum. And Josh, thanks for setting this up and driving for us. Appreciate it. Let's just preview the agenda really quickly. Next page. And again, Josh, are you recording this?
Yes, but it's tricky to move between the slides and the unmute button, so it might be a second. Sorry for the delay.
Oh, no, that's okay. I just want to make sure you're recording and people knew that it was being recorded.
Yes, sir.
So one of the first things we'll do is just welcome Amy and introduce ourselves just real quickly. I put a couple slides together looking back what we've accomplished and then what we have going forward. Want to talk about the property owner survey. If there's any other suggested breakouts that we should be looking at, and that will be some nice open discussion there, as well as additional questions that we might want answers to help us refine things. I want to talk about the survey, the town hall, and we'll spend 10-15 minutes on that. A question came up at the December board meeting when we presented the top line survey results and it was a very positive question, is like, how do we expect or how do we want to measure integrity? So we'll have some discussion on that. I have some thoughts. And we'll I just sent out the situation analysis summary this week. I've been working on it on and off. It was really a rough draft, initial draft, and just want to get your initial reactions to it. And I'll probably ask for your final feedback, by the end of next week. But I think it's a good step forward, but still needs some work. And then as required, or, again, within this committee, just open discussion, any other thoughts, we'll leave time for that and wrap up next meeting. So and again, just you might want to put that on your calendars now. The next meeting we're going to keep it at the fourth Thursday of the month. So that will be February 24th. So I'm a little slow today. As many of you know, my daughter is in Germany with my son-in-law who's in the Navy. They recently found out they're coming back. They're going to be moving to Chicago to the Great Lakes Naval Air Station for at least 2 years. But we had a big surprise last night where she's having another baby. So I'll have my third grandchild. Awesome. So it's pretty funny the way they did it. They sent us scratch-off cards, and the bottom, the prize was we're having a baby, and I'm like, what's this prize? What does this mean? We didn't win anything. And so anyway, we're up late. We're pretty excited about that. I don't know that they expected it, but they're happy about it, and I don't know that we definitely didn't expect a third, so we're happy. So anyway, next up, introductions. I thought just to help Amy out a little bit and get to know Amy a little bit. And again, I've interacted with Amy a little bit on the board, and I can't imagine a more engaged board member than Amy at this point. They're all good. It's amazing the abuse they take, and you have to take it with a smile, but they do a great job, and like us, they're all volunteers. So anyway, just a name, when you join this committee, your professional background, what you do for a living, or what are you continuing to do for a living. And then I thought, make it fun, a favorite drink. So I'll start. My name is Bernie McGarry. I hate to confuse you sometimes. I know I use two different emails, but I'll probably use my Salisbury one. I am teaching a graduate class this semester, which is a little bit lighter workload than normal. So I will have more time to commit to this. I joined this committee, probably 2 years ago. My term is up, I think, in September, October, but the committee didn't really start taking off till December or January. So. And then in March, I became co-chairman. And then, so I think the committee's been running well for about a year with Mo's leadership. And then professional background, my background is in marketing, as all of you know, except maybe Amy, for companies like Kraft, Hershey, Campbell Soup. And in that role, I did a lot of planning, marketing planning, business planning, et cetera. So it's kind of helpful. And now I'm teaching marketing and marketing research. And then finally, my favorite drink, I'm kind of between an IPA and vodka and cranberry. And again, it doesn't have to be alcoholic for those of you that don't drink. So that's me. We'll just go around the horn. Who wants to go next?
This is Helen. Let me turn myself on. Do you see me? Can you hear me?
There you go.
Yes.
Okay. Hi, Amy. I just met you recently, Helen Johnson, and I've been on the committee. I think also I'll be 2 years in March. That first year was pretty slow with COVID, I guess, and everything. My background is in nursing. I did a lot of clinical nursing. I did a lot of critical care and wound care and the whole gamut. And then I spent many years in administration, and my background that I did have, we started strategic planning for 3 hospitals, Washington, Martinsburg, and Baltimore VA hospitals. So I was on that group. Joined the committee because I love Ocean Pines. I wanted to do something. I knew a previous member of the board, and I had mentioned, let me know something that, and she knew me. Oops, let it go. And let me know if there was anything, I could do. You think anything good for me? So here I am on the strategic planning committee, and it's really, I think, a really good committee. Thanks for your leadership, Bernie, and everybody else's input. We work well together, and I think we've done good things so far. So glad to have you as our advisor.
Jenny, what do
my
you?
favorite drink. My favorite drink.
That's right.
Okay. I started when I moved here. Of course, it was the Orange Crush, but now I've grown up a little bit, and now I'm doing old fashions. So that's what
Jenny, why don't you go next? I'm sorry.
My name's Jenny Cropper Rhines. I sell real estate in the area. I'll go, from Ocean City to Salisbury. I joined this committee, I think, at the beginning too, but I've also participated with the communications committee, which I chaired for 6 or 7 years, and now I'm on my 7th or 8th year. And I also chaired the 50th anniversary committee for Ocean Pines. I'm currently on the board for the Worcester County Veterans Memorial Foundation also. I joined because it felt like a natural progression. Coming out of communications, we kind of did some of this survey stuff several years ago, and it just felt like a good role to step into. My favorite drink, I'm happy with White Claws right now. They don't give me heartburn, so that works.
I like it.
I'm just going down the grid here. Becky, if you don't mind going next.
Can't hear.
You're on mute, Becky.
Got it.
Great.
I'm Becky Ferguson. You'll see me on the email as Rebecca Colt Ferguson. I joined the committee within the last year. I live up on the north side. Amy, I hail from your section of Baltimore County. I was a nurse for 41 years, working in a variety of areas, including public health and community health. And at the end of my career, I was really working on translating evidence into practice. So we were really looking at data analysis and how that can be translated into action, and what are the challenges that come with that process. So I've really enjoyed looking at these survey results from the various perspectives, and I've enjoyed, providing feedback on that. My favorite drink, believe it or not, is coffee. And I'll put anything in it. And it can be alcohol or non-alcohol.
Great. Thank you, Becky.
Yeah.
And thanks for all your help, both you and Jenny. Next up, Wes.
Hi, everybody. I'm Wes Blakesley. I'm a Penn State engineer. Started my career working for NASA, the space program. I was there when we went to the moon, which was really a lot of fun and very exciting. Ultimately got my law degree, started my own law office. But the roughly last 20 years of my career, I ended up at Johns Hopkins University, where I was the head of the office that commercializes all of the inventions at the university, which was very interesting. Retired from there about 5 years ago now, and I do consulting work. I'm a founder of a startup. I serve as general counsel for several startup companies developing biotechnology. I joined this committee just about a year ago now, and I've enjoyed it very much. We're not yet full-time residents of Ocean Pines, but I think I've talked my wife into retiring this spring, so that may change soon. Hard to pick my favorite drink because I like so many, but probably the thing that I drink the most often, because it's easy, is a Jack Daniel's Single Barrel. So I'll put that in.
So Wes, we are.
Yes, we are Penn State.
I didn't know that about you. My daughter went there. And,
Oh, cool. Yeah, it's a great place. I'm on the engineering school advisory committee. I've been on that for many years. I was chair of it last year, and so I get a chance to get up there on a regular basis, and it's a special place.
Good for you. Good for you. Who we have? Rob.
Hey, good morning, and again, welcome, Becky. Rob Kiesling here. Professionally, I retired a little over 2 years ago from AT&T after a 29-year career in the telecommunications business, all in various corporate sales management roles in and around the Baltimore area. I used to get down this way quite a bit because Purdue was one of my clients for a number of years. So that's my professional background. I guess I've been with the committee here going on 2 years, but to kind of dovetail on some of the things others have said, it was kind of a slow start, and it's just been the last year or so that we've really been percolating. Spend most of my time in the Pines. I do still have a residence in Hartford County, Bel Air to be specific. My significant other is a professor at Loyola University, so she has to teach. So we got to go back there every once in a while. And I got family back there. Just actually kind of dovetail on one thing Bernie said. I got a call on Friday from my son who lives in Columbia that he and his wife are expecting their second child come August. So I share in that kind of excitement that you shared with us before, Bernie. Favorite drink? Yeah, I got several. I'm a beer guy. Absolutely love a chocolate milkshake from Chick-fil-A. I've acquired a taste for bourbon, and I very varied taste for bourbons, but I do like an old fashioned. And somebody said coffee. I am addicted to the Cuban latte from On What Grounds coffee shop in Berlin. If you haven't been there and tried that, that's a winner. So, but again,
I'll
Amy,
put that
welcome.
on my list.
Absolutely welcome.
Rob, aren't you doing? First of all, congratulations. Aren't
Yeah.
you working? Aren't
Yeah,
you working?
Well, I as part of my retirement, I did obtain my real estate license, and I'm affiliated with a commercial real estate firm, and that's I'll be frank, I view that as a hobby, as opposed to a vocation, being that I am retired. So, but yeah, thanks for reminding me about that, Bernie.
Cool. Let's see, Rob, Becky, Wes. Anybody else on the committee other than we'll go to Josh next. And Josh, Amy, the way I treat the committee is everybody's on the committee, whether you're on the board or whether you're on the staff. But I'm sensitive to not ask Josh or Steve or anybody to do specific work. But we're all one team, we're all one committee. Everybody has a voice, everybody has an input. I guess from a Robert's Rules of Laws, if we were voting on something that you and Josh wouldn't have a vote in this case, but I consider Josh my best friend. No, my he really. I mean, we couldn't have done it without his help. We wouldn't be anywhere. So, Josh, over to you.
Thank you. Josh Davis, I think I've been working with you guys for about a year. I was a reporter and news editor before I came here about 3 years ago, and I'll go with Rise Up Coffee or a Bullet Old Fashioned.
Cool. And last but not least, Amy.
Good morning. My name's Amy Peck. I was appointed to the board in October. I was surprised because I send emails quite often, and they don't always agree with the board members, but I was told that they were informative and well-researched. So they appointed me. My background is a pre-K teacher, and I'm finding that experience actually helpful in dealing with the board. I also work summers here in Ocean Pines at the pool, so I get recognized quite often. I know you from somewhere. It's usually the pool. I've been here since 2002, part-time. So I have experience as a resident here with young children, as a part-time resident, as an employee, and now I'm basically here full-time. My favorite drink is, I'm a Baltimore girl, so I would have to say Natty Bell. And but I mainly drink tea, any kind of tea, hot tea, iced tea, mint tea. I grow my own tea leaves. So I'm a tea girl. I'm glad to be here.
Amy, are you here full time now?
Just about. I'm not supposed to be, but since my appointment, I rarely go back to Baltimore. My husband has that duty, but I've always been full time here in the summers.
Okay.
So as soon as my kids were done the last day at school, we came down here, and I've always been here full time in the summer.
And one question, I think I might have asked you informally after a board meeting or something like that, but about how many hours do you think you put in a week on your board involvement?
Lately it's 40. It's not always supposed to be that, but I knew going in, it is quite the time commitment. I received emails last night from Dr. Horn that were dated after midnight. And that's quite often. And I'm surprised I get emails from Mr. Viola on Sundays. I mean, the commitment on the board and with the staff is amazing.
Yeah, that's something I've learned. And again, I think, I know I read your bio before, but just your background of full-time, part-time, employee, teacher, now a board member. So you really bring a lot of different perspectives, I believe, to the board. And like I said earlier on, I can't think of anybody that's more positive, more passionate. I know one of your passions is getting more residents involved, or getting more engagement and things like that for the community. So I think that's great. And the recent announcement about the virtual meetings and that's all a step positive forward, in my opinion, on transparency and just making it available to people. So all good. Thank you all. Did I miss anybody? I hope not. Okay. Next up, next slide, please. Looks like we have Greg on. Welcome, Greg Ellison. Now we'll get into some meat of the matter here. So I thought just to take a look back a little, it's like, hey, we haven't met in a little while. I know our last meeting was early December. Hopefully everybody had a good holiday. But looking back, I thought these were some of the major steps, and I bolded them a little bit, but we really started to clarify the role of the committee in January and February. I know I was in Germany and on some calls or FaceTime over there, and started to really develop what the process was back in February and March. We started to coordinate the SWOT analysis for a month or two, when we took that to the Ocean Pines department chairs as well as the executive committee. I know I had a roundtable at the executive committee where we built that out, and they went back to their committees and did the same, which is all positive. It really helped inform our survey, what questions to ask, what were the key issues, what were the strengths. We did a lot of work individually on benchmarking other homeowners associations, which I think is always helpful to look outward versus just inward. There's 2 or 3 updates on the board of directors, just keeping them informed and involved. And then finally, we created, tested, and executed what I would consider a successful property owner survey. Started to develop it in July, released it into September, and close it out like November 18th. And then we've been analyzing the results. And then finally, we did present the survey summary results to the board of directors at their December meeting, which I think was well received. And those were, I think, some of the key things that we did last year. I think more importantly is to talk about the next slide and what we want to accomplish this year, or some of the milestones we want to set for this year. And actually, this is a slide. Actually, I have my manuals both from Kraft and Hershey, where I actually taught strategic planning to mid-level managers. But we called it at the, I forget what KISS stood for, but it was like knowledge and insights for strategic success. That's what it was. Of course,
Or
Hershey
keep
KISS.
it simple, stupid.
Not
Yeah,
the KISS
yeah.
principle.
And it was just, we did it. What was funny was the CEO, well, I'd worked with him at Kraft. He was a senior vice president, and he took what we did at Kraft to Hershey when he became the CEO. His name was Rick Lenny, and he instituted there. So it was basically the same program. It just was, they called it a different name. Anyway, assessing the situation, it's a funnel. And you're trying to incorporate, trying to collect as much information as possible. We talked a lot about before about the assessment analysis, and we talked about the 6 C's, which we'll get into a little bit later. The consumer, the category, the company, in our case, community, and we consider the consumer the homeowners. The SWOT analysis, which we did. SCAs are sustainable competitive advantage. What we do better than anybody else. Something that can't be easily taken away from you, and then get into conclusions and implications. And what I tried to do is take a major step forward over the past couple of weeks and get us closer to conclusions and implications, which then you start going out and you start getting the board involved. You start to develop strategies. You start to get detailed plans of action, and then you start to measure it. So I think we're down at the bottom or the middle, almost close to the middle of the funnel. So anyway, next slide, Josh. So again, I think the discussion on this slide is, are we missing anything for this year? Is the timing realistic? And do we have a town hall for the strategic planning session? I'm thinking we do, but and these are, I would say, recommendations for this committee's discussion and target timing. I think I've always tried to under promise and over deliver, but it took us longer, I think, than we thought to maybe get the survey finalized or whatever. So I tend to be optimistic. So anyway, and some of this, as we had committed to the board in the last meeting, was a deeper dive on the survey results. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a couple minutes. Finalize that situation analysis. I don't expect it to do it today, but pulling all the data together. Do we miss anything? What else do we want to include? Conduct a virtual town hall. This is something that we promised, and we'll talk about again today, to go over the survey results and hopefully get community engagement or more community engagement on that. And then start to share the situation analysis with the board of directors, and we'll work closely with Amy. Once it's finalized, we'll either send that out or present it to the board. So that they're seeing the data in the same way and they don't have any questions. And then talk to both Amy and Colette. And this was my idea. This strategic plan should not be the strategic planning committee's, strategic plan. It should be the board strategic plan. And we're here as the experts and can advise and help them get there. But I think once we complete our situation analysis, it's going to be pretty clear what the priority should be. So we've done a lot of the homework, kind of directed it. And then I don't know, it'll just be one session. I mean, if we have an all-day session, we probably can get it done. If it's, maybe, 2 hour sessions, I think there's going to be more than one session needed with the board. And you might say, what do we do in the meantime? I think we'll be looking at it the same way, coming up with our own conclusions. Advising the board. Hopefully you can be involved with some of those board sessions. And we'll be developing things like helping develop a recommended mission and vision and a bunch of other things that kind of go with the strategic plan. And Josh, I think my eyes are bad and I can no longer see the size of the screen.
Oh, really? Oh.
Yeah, it shrunk down. And again, I'm not an expert on Teams. I'm more on, why am I doing this? Recording? Okay, yeah. There you go. Thank you. I said, as a question mark, budget committee. I've interacted with the head of the budget committee, and, once this comes to life, and I wasn't that involved with the recent budget meetings, is we want to work with them closely, and they do a great job, is how does this get incorporated into the future budgets? How does the strategic plan thinking? work. I think we should have a town hall on our strategic plan recommendation, after the board is involved, and get the community involved and engage and raise issues. So 2 major times, one on the survey results and then once on our recommendation. And then you start to, based on the community's input, finalize a recommendation and take it to the board in a final wrapped up package. But then you start bringing the strategic plan to life in the budgeting process. And something that's not on here, but there's probably a step where and again, this is just my thinking, Amy, is, do we get involved with some of the subcommittees, helping them develop their own plans that tie to the strategy, or at least sharing the strategic plan? Here's what we saw, here's what we came up with, to make sure they're aware. I know John's very involved and will be involved, but taking it down that next level, to make sure that they understand and how to use it when they're planning for the future. I think this timing would work, Amy, from a budgeting standpoint, that it would be done early enough, if it's done in August, to help, before the planning gets started, right? I think so, yeah. So discussion, are we missing any big things here? Is the timing realistic? Town hall and strategic plan makes sense. I'll open it up for discussion, and I will start with Helen, because you just popped up. I mean, it might and again, if you have other thoughts after the meeting, that's great, but just initial reaction, does this make sense?
I think, I think you've thought of everything. I think the town hall important. One thing about strategic planning sessions with the board, something that I may have mentioned to you at some point, but in listening to some board meetings or budget meetings, that kind of thing, I've heard John Viola talk about, well, in our benchmarking, we learned such and such. Or someone said, or probably John Viola too, maybe said something, our strategic plan, tells us we should maybe go this way. So I'm wondering, or I think that it would really help us to maybe if they would share what they've benchmarked, what their strategic plan is. Are we kind of on the same page as they are? And maybe be able to look at that information.
Yeah, I will make that as an action item, and we'll work with Amy just to, again, that's the type of thing where you don't want to present a plan and it's like, oh, that doesn't agree with what we looked at, right. That we found out this, and that's a good point, and I will have that as an action item that we carry forward.
Okay.
Thanks.
I've always kind of thought that the strategic plan that they're referencing is more bricks and mortar than philosophy, perhaps. Mm-hmm. So I do think that they could be overlapping. I think that there are, I think anyway, if I understand, that there are two different things happening. Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to go around the horn. We'll come back and maybe ask Rob, Wes, Rob, just to keep any thoughts? Looks like you're on mute, Rob. But
yeah, sorry, couldn't tell if I was muted or not. Looking in the wrong spot. No, I'm in agreement here. I think the timeline is certainly realistic. I do agree. I think it's a really good idea when we do come out with and start putting a strategic plan together to do something to involve the community, another town hall. It's a great idea.
Wes, any final thoughts? And again, I'm looking for feedback even after the meeting, so you'll have a copy of this.
Well, I also agree with Helen. We've sort of been working in a vacuum here relative to, what the, operations people, John Viola, are thinking in terms of what their strategic plan is and what they've got on their, on their radar for what they want to do. So getting some insight into that information would be extremely helpful in trying to, formulate a plan going forward. It'd be nice to have some of the other data that you made some allusions to it in the the document you sent.
Yeah.
We don't really have a good breakdown of the budget. Half of the budget is other. that doesn't give you a very detailed insight into where the money is being spent, and that would be helpful to know, what those burdens are, and how they're broken down. And one would hope that there'd be more granularity, in the board, but in the the budget rather. But in terms of the timeline, it looks like it's pretty good and doable.
Becky?
I think the timeline looks great. I'm in the camp of Helen and Wes, and here is my concern concerning the present. We are analyzing this data, and we're currently in a budget cycle for next year. And I'm concerned that what we are putting forward may or may not be in allegiance with the current budget set by the board, and that when the community sees the outcomes of what is coming in the next year's budget, there may be some pushback in terms of that would actually maybe even reflect on our credibility as a group. But I also think it will perhaps threaten the credibility of a board that has just changed over with new people. And if we look through the lens of safety, maintenance of infrastructure, and appearance, which were the top 3 results of our survey, that's going to be the lens that we're looking at the present budget with. There are things in the present budget that do not match up with those 3 items. So we have a chance to catch up on the next budget cycle, but the current budget cycle is the one that I'm concerned about, that perhaps would jeopardize what we're doing going forward. So the question is, does the current budget reflect the survey results? And I think we need to know that prior to, I think we need to share with the board our concerns prior to their budget action. They may approve the budget, but that doesn't mean the budget can't be changed or upgraded or whatever. And I have a specific example that I'm happy to share, but I think as an entire committee, we do want to open up the lines of communication between the board and our committee to make sure we're all on the same page.
Good point. Amy, what I would say is against 2 things here. One is we've had a lot of discussions in the past where we would hear something on planning and somebody would say, oh yeah, we have a strategic plan. And Colette would dig into it with, whoever she could find that had information, and they're like, no, there's really not a strategic plan. And I think we came to the conclusion that there wasn't a strategic plan. Now, there might be a capital spending plan. There might be some ideas of somebody put some numbers, what they might look like 3 years out, but there really wasn't a strategic plan. But separately from, and I've heard a little bit too about some of the comments that Helen made. Well, we benchmarked and here's what we've learned. We don't have some of that information. So in some of the things that were done for planning for this year, there's probably some homework that was done, which is all great if you're looking at, other homeowners associations or other situations and benchmarking before you make a decision. That's great. So that's where we might need some help, and we'll have it as an action item and try to get the board involved. To Becky's point, it is a concern. I think there is some actions being taken. Whether the increase in amenity fees for non-residents was part of the, it was part of the survey, but I think it was probably thought about in the budgeting process. But then when the budget came out, or when the survey results came out and said, residents think that that's a way to, maybe increase some revenue. And I think that's an example of, where somebody that might have been on the fence, whether they should do it or not, might have helped them. That's just my own opinion. I'm not sure if it's fact, but yeah, we knew that going in. In hindsight, again, with the survey, we probably left a little bit more timing. than we needed to because we got so many results so quickly, but it's also good to be fair and equitable to people that didn't respond as quickly. But we wanted to do it right versus get it done for this planning. My question, Amy, to you specifically is, do you know anything about capital budgeting and when that starts and when that gets finalized? And
With the budgeting process, earlier is better. Do you want me to address the other concerns regarding town hall and?
yeah. I mean, whatever. Yeah.
My thoughts with your town hall is I just don't want it to get lost in the noise. The board is meeting on the 23rd for their regular board meeting in February. There's also going to be the bylaw changes and referendums, and that is definitely going to be a February town hall on the referendum. So I just don't want your committee to get lost in the noise. So that is a plan, that's something that you should think about with planning. There was a remark about going to the committees. Please, I think that is an excellent idea. I'm on the racket committee as the liaison, and I use your community survey all the time, your demographics all the time. And it helps committees with their planning and with when they present something, they can use your survey results and it really helps the discussion. The other thing I noted was, does the current budget reflect your survey? And I think people are listening. The fire department funding, that's safety, and that was addressed. Reserves, that's infrastructure, making sure we have enough money. Extra money was going to the roads. That's definitely a safety thing. $400,000 was put into drainage, and I noticed that was a big concern with the survey. And again, it goes to infrastructure. And the increase for non-residents for amenities was addressed in all of the different amenities, and it was raised. So I think you're being heard.
Yeah, and I would say, Becky, that I guess we didn't. I think your point is there's an issue that people might see the survey and maybe we'll push the, again, if people show up for it, but hopefully, I mean, they will in March. We'll probably have a town hall sometime in March then to go over the survey results. And we'll make that clear that, there might be some impacts on current budget, but my expectation, and not to sound arrogant, that this will have a major impact on future planning. And, whether we miss 2022, it's going to have a huge impact on 23 through 28, because, they're going to have these buckets, at least in my experience. And I think I've talked to Rob and some other people before. When you have a strategic plan and you have these 4 priorities, if your spending doesn't fit into those 4 or 5 priorities, but all of a sudden is in, bad word, but other bucket, it's like you have to really justify why you're spending money on other when it wasn't identified as a priority. So I see it. It was interesting being at the last board meeting, and Amy, I know you were there in December when I presented the results, and I know you were planning, you had saw the results before and you used it in some of your recommendations, but how people were quoting in that meeting the results of the survey. It really was coming to life. And I was almost laughing as I sat through there. But I mean, that's what we want it to be in the future. Residents don't want that. Residents have identified, somebody wants a crab pier. It's like, that's not a priority. I'm sorry. I mean, some people want it, but the majority said not a priority. So, I mean, I think that's Becky, your point is well raised. I'm going to include it in my minutes. But I think we did miss the planning process, but I think it did have some impact, but it'll have a bigger impact going forward.
Yeah, and I think if we explain in the town hall that, we've looked back, we're looking toward the future, and we can't capture everything in this cycle, then that sort of helps us moving forward. I mean, if we can offer an explanation.
Yep. And that's, I'm glad you brought it up. I'm going to move on to the next. So those are target dates again those are target dates, but hopefully we can meet or beat them, or get on the early side. When we say March, April, hopefully it's March, not end of April. Anyway, there's a lot going on, a lot of activity going on. So again, we have to fit into their cycles. Anyway, next slide. Thank you for your input.
Can I say one thing before you move on?
Yeah.
What's that, Rob?
Jenny had her hand up, wanted to say something there.
That's okay. We don't want to hear from Jenny.
Well, so anyway, sorry about that.
I'm sorry I missed you.
And she
That's
used her
okay.
hand and everything.
It came
know.
up during the communications committee, a question as to whether or not the communications committee should have a town hall on the question of electronic voting. And I said, I thought based on the survey, that was the reason it came up. And I said, I thought we should hear when the strategic planning committee was planning on having a town hall to discuss the results of the survey.
Yeah.
It felt to me like it was putting the cart before the horse. So anyway, one of my on my list was to go back to the communications committee and let them know when the strategic planning committee was planning to do their town hall. I heard Amy, and it does make a lot of sense that it could get lost in the shuffle of all the other things that are going on. But also to Becky's point about timing, the election is going to be in August. So it's just food for thought. If anyone wants to have additional conversations about the idea of electronic voting, I don't know whose role it is, but it's come up in communications, and seems to be an ongoing question. And I don't know if maybe that might not be for the elections committee, but that said, that just came up and I wanted to mention it.
Good. Yeah, I mean, I think that makes sense, not to have their own town hall just on that subject. I know the elections committee has asked for a lot of data, and we've shared a lot of, I don't know if it's called the elections committee, but
It is, I believe.
yeah, and they've asked for a lot of data, and I don't know at this point where their head is on that. I would say, to me, my point was walk before you run. And I would not do the next election necessarily completely, online. But there might be something with the resolution or something that needs a vote that you might try to test hybrid. I mean, we had 98.5%, of people that completed the survey did it online. But Josh came up with a good plan to have hard copies available for those that, but to me, it's a potential really cost saving, I think, huge cost saving, but I don't think you want to move from completely online, completely hard copy to completely online right away. But so let's have the town hall in March if you want to get back to them, and we'll go from there on that. And I'm sorry I missed you, Jenny. Me.
No worries. I guess I could take my hand down. I got to figure out how to do that.
I'm much better at Zoom than I am Microsoft Teams, as Josh well knows. So property owner survey, sent out a couple weeks ago. Is there any other demographics we want to look at? Any other questions we'd like answers to? And last but not least, Josh, did you budget for SurveyMonkey in 2022?
No, we did not.
It's not a major expense, but the reason I asked that is if we don't continue SurveyMonkey, which runs through July and was like $1,400, you'll lose all your data. So, I mean, any cut we have and any copies we made of it, we'll have. But I'm just saying that electronically, it won't be available anymore to look at and say, oh, I want to look at it, which I've done. I want to look at the people that said they were extremely unhappy living in Ocean Pines and how they voted on certain things, which I did. And there were 16 people that had number one out of 1,832 that were extremely unhappy in the survey. And what I found was the degree of unhappiness, it was like the same exact results. They were just, their numbers were more severe when they voted on things, but it didn't like they weren't like not happy about something different than what the overall survey did. So my point is that's something I'm going to make a note that we need to make sure that we did that. We did include that, Amy, by the way, in our annual report that we wanted to make sure that was budgeted for. That was the one request we had. So it's not a huge expense, but it's something that we want to do, and we don't have to address right this minute. But with the rest of the questions here, I'll just leave it open for discussion. and we'll go around the horn again. I'm going to start with Wes this time. What's your reaction to what we've done so far on the survey?
Well, I think it's pretty good. I've struggled myself in trying to understand exactly what some of the things mean.
Okay.
In the survey, and my gut, and I don't know that this has any validity at all in this circumstances, but my gut tells me that for some things, you know, the survey may be more rosy. I don't know if that's the right, answer. I think the people in Ocean Pines tend to be a pretty positive group. It seems to me, just by looking at the survey. So there may be, there's some things that I hear people talk about in the neighborhood that aren't as reflected in the survey. But then again, my neighborhood, I don't know that many people yet. My neighborhood is in Ernst Landing, so there may be
Yeah,
it may be less reflective of the whole place than it should be. But that's for I think what we're doing is I think we're right on point. It's hard to know how to tread here with the board, in terms of they've got their own stuff going on and their own plans, but the board seems to be supportive of what we're doing, and I think the board wants this information. So I think we're on the right track. I'm just not 100% sure that I understand myself what some of these responses really mean yet.
That's helpful, Wes, because that, again, going into a town hall, we need to continue to simplify to make sure people understand what it's done. I'm in the trees. I have to take a step back and make sure that it makes it even simpler and clear. But well taken. Becky.
I agree with Wes, because I've shared before my concern about the percentage of neutrality that is reflected on this survey, despite the positive responses the number of responses that we've seen. We have on multiple occasions a large percentage of responses at the I want to call it the null, meaning I don't know one way, I don't know another way, and we don't know why those answers are there. And through coaching, Bernie has helped me understand that you can't make further inferences about that neutrality response. Why are people neutral on some crucial response issues? And one thing that the town hall offers us is the opportunity to educate the community. And when we educate the community, and I really do feel that there's an education deficit regarding issues within the community. One is sustainability. If we can somehow tie in sustainability with the appearance piece of the community and the infrastructure piece of the community, and we look forward to sustainability efforts, but quite frankly, that's where the money's going to be in the government, then we bring the community up to a level, because they weren't interested in environmental or sustainable responses. What we educate the community to, that's where we're going to have to go if we're going to be here another 50 to 100 years, and who knows what would happen after that, for the next generation. So I think education is a huge part of that piece, Wes, to clarify what we mean, or what we say, what we mean by certain questions, and invite that feedback. I also think there is a piece of dissatisfaction that is not measured by this survey. We asked pointed questions, and they were not satisfaction-based questions. And I think when we get into the discussion of how do we measure quality, that's where, if we put out a quality survey, that's where you're going to see whether people are happy with the timing, how long it took them to get an answer, and some of the other quality components that you can measure. So I would support renewing the SurveyMonkey because I think it's a tool, or somehow purchasing a survey package, because I think it's a really good tool to reach people with. And the data to support that is the fact that we have a very large percentage of people in the community that are data-based. So I think that's our future. We're saving money with that. So those are just my initial thoughts on that.
Good. I made some notes there. And we've talked before, and again, Becky probably gets mad at me about the neutrality, but I guess the best example for the rest of you, there was a high percentage of people that just say, hey, I'm neutral on this. And I guess the best way to try to explain, I was telling Becky, it's like, you know, whenever you hear like a political poll, you never hear anybody saying, well, 50% of the people were neutral on Joe Biden. It's like, you know, it's positive or negative. You know, it's not like those people that don't have an opinion. And it just, I don't know if it's a law of marketing research, but people that are neutral, you know, you just get a lot of people that, you know, it's like they don't have an opinion. They don't care. You know, they either don't care or they don't have an opinion. So anyway, moving on, Jenny, any thoughts on other breakouts, other questions we'd like to ask, things that we don't have? Any thoughts?
No, I do have a thought on neutrality. I mean, to me, I look at it like they're not unhappy enough to be concerned about it. I guess is, you know, not unhappy enough to take action, not happy enough to get involved. That's for sure. But anyway, no, I mean, I think it's a pretty, there is a lot of information. And I do think educating on the interpretation of results, and I think anytime when you're looking at statistics and things like this, is you just want to make sure people understand how to interpret it. And I think that's pretty important. But overall, I think it's this synopsis is excellent.
Rob, I'd probably miss you.
Yeah, good points by all so far. And I'm just going to kind of spin off of Becky's point about kind of that neutrality and take it a step further. And I think we've spoken about this before, and this is kind of an age-old issue. What do we get, 1,800 responses?
Yeah.
That means there's, what, over 6,000 people who were apathetic, maybe, enough not to even participate.
Yeah.
And we can't fix that, and I'm not suggesting we do, but boy, I'd sure like to know. Why didn't you fill out the survey? Is it that you just don't care? Or did you not know about it? I don't know how we address that, but that to me, that again, 1,800 is fantastic, but that still means there's well over 6,000 property owners whose voice is not being heard. And you wonder what else that would bring to the table if they did participate.
Great point. And just to address that, I have a couple ideas of other questions we could ask, and we could do that easily in a weekly newsletter. It might be things like the strategic planning meeting, you know, or committee, and maybe we don't do it till after we do the thing, but would like to understand more about what we can do to improve safety. And list, you know, please vote on the following, rank the following 5 things in order of priority of what you think would help, you know, Ocean Pines continue to build on its safety record. Like things like that we can make very specific records. Like not only is safety important, the community ranks these 3 things as far as how we can improve safety. To your point about asking, you know, finding out the rest. And just to be clear, especially for the press that's on, I think with 1,832, that's more than national political polls. You know, we got that within our community. It's almost 20% of the residents. So it is statistically significant. It's like plus or minus 1.5%, 2%. So, I mean, we did get we got a lot of engagement, but the interesting thing is, you know, it might be nice to know, why didn't you participate? Was it lack of awareness? Lack of, time, lack of I mean, you can really do those things, and not to keep on talking to you, Amy, I'd like to see more and more people engage, the community. And I think you would too. It's easy to do it. And that's one of the keys of social media engagement is ask questions. And Josh knows that. So we have SurveyMonkey that we can ask additional questions. I had one or two other ones that I might want to dig into that really allow us clarity when making recommendations to the board about specific things that were important. To your point about sustainability, we can ask questions. There's a couple things we could do. And I thought there was a real positive step where the Marina Committee was asking for ideas, and I think they got a fair number of ideas. And I interacted with some of the people in that committee. It's like, once you get the ideas, why don't you have the community rank them? Versus just having a couple people say these are great ideas. You can easily use SurveyMonkey to rank what the best ideas were, what's really a priority. So that's my thoughts on that. As far as breakouts, nobody addressed that. I'm thinking, I could look at it's somewhat easy to do, but I could look at older people. I think the one thing I might want to look at is I looked at less than 50-year-olds, which aligned up with people, children, family with children under 18. I might want to look at people over 70 and just see what their concerns are. So, do both ends of the spectrum. But I think the big thing for me was when I looked at all these different demographics, the overall conclusions did not change. There might have been some subtleties. For example, families with children, I don't have it in front of me, were more sensitive to the homeowner's assessment value for the money. Again, it makes sense. They might have less money. They're feeding more people. They have less income. It was a little bit higher ranked than some of the other ones. And there was a couple examples like that, but in general, it still ended up being infrastructure, aesthetics and community appearance, and overall value for the money for the homeowner assessment fee. So anyway, we're running a little bit behind time. Let's jump to the next topic, which is the survey town hall. I don't have the perspective. Again, Jenny's like the mayor of Ocean Pines. She's been on so many committees, but your involvement with the communications committee, Josh's expertise. I'm thinking March at this point, after everything else is done, and hopefully it gets there's something, to share the town hall results, and then post them online. But to me, and I added one now after this discussion, I'll add education, onto it of this, but it shares some of the results in a simple, easy to understand format. Also, just make sure that they know, and we talked a little bit about, well, it might not have affected this board meeting, or this budget meeting. There has been some implications, but in the future, it'll really drive budgeting decisions. So make sure that they understand and what our timeline is and things like that, but then have maybe a little bit open discussion, at the end where community members have a chance to talk about a few things that we might have questions on, or that they have concerns about, like maybe something we missed, or if somebody raises something that we hadn't thought about, it's like, hey, we'll send a survey out and ask that question, or something like that. So I'd like to make it a little bit interactive, even though I've never done it on Microsoft Teams before.
It's not bad. It's
not bad?
easy because of the
Okay.
hand raising.
Yeah. I'm thinking I'm going to recommend maybe the meeting doesn't go longer than an hour and a half, but maybe it should be an hour. And then day a week, time and date. I'm guessing there's some lessons learned or something that people have done that might have some expertise, and trying to solidify a day of the week and a time.
Actually,
no.
no.
No?
That's the funny thing, Bernie. Our data says it doesn't matter when you hold it.
Oh,
People show up based on topic, not by day of the week, time, anything at all. Yeah.
huh.
What do you think about doing something unusual, like having a town hall at the yacht club outside with microphones so that people can attend in an open air environment rather than you can follow it up with a Teams presentation. I really like the idea of trying to encourage community feedback. And I think the outcome of that will be that we have more people getting involved in our committees, because we really need more community involvement. And we have a large portion of people that that aren't really involved in committees, but they're interested, because as a newcomer, as a new full-time newcomer here, I have seen people, I have talked to older residents in my neighborhood who don't know where to go for information. Don't even sometimes know the neighbors on their street. Never saw the survey, never realized that the survey was even out there, even with all the work that we did in terms of trying to get that out there. So there's multiple reasons why those targeted monthly questions in the newsletter, a community town hall, even on a survey again, using the multi-modalities that we used, will generate more interest in topics.
You just gave me an idea. What does our first survey question be? What's the, give them options for town halls and see what the consensus is.
Yeah.
And then we'll have that data if we have it in the future. And again, some people want on Saturdays, some people might want it Mondays at night. But we can throw out 5 options and get a consensus and schedule it around that. I mean, that's just an idea to get community engagement and maybe get some consensus that 70% of the people prefer it on a Saturday morning. I don't know. Whatever it might be.
They may prefer it, but are they going to show up?
Exactly.
But the
Yeah.
question,
I mean, this is a road we have been down for years.
Right.
Yeah. Well,
but the issue is you offered the feedback.
Yes.
And if the feedback doesn't come, the data is we didn't get any feedback. So as a committee, then we make using the history of the past and the people that are more experienced, then we choose the best avenue that's available to us at that time. But the fact that people are offered it's almost like you got to keep going to the hole every time,
Yeah, I think when I presented at the board, I mentioned that it's great to take a step positive, and I know Amy's been behind the recommendation on virtual meetings. And I said, don't be surprised if additional people don't show up, but at least you made that a point, and to be transparent and to make it available. But I think some of these questions, I think this is what's good about this committee is I certainly didn't have the idea to go out. Well, I didn't know that we didn't really have like the data that says this is the best time to have the meeting, but this is the way to put action to words and ask the community, what they would prefer and schedule around that. We have plenty of time to do that. And it could go out in a weekly newsletter. Maybe it's 2 or 3 questions. How long should the meeting be? 30 minutes, hour, whatever. I mean, we could ask a couple of these questions. But any other reaction? Again, one is to educate. 2 would be to share some of the results in a simplified format. Make sure they're clear on how this impacted or didn't impact the budget and how it'll impact, future plans. And then have some type of open discussion. It's not coming to my mind right away, but I think there's a couple topics. If nobody has anything, I might say, listen, what are some ways that we could improve safety in the community, and really almost like an online focus group and have people try to interact. And Jenny, you said that does work. It does work pretty well. Okay.
Yep. We did. Yep.
Okay.
I think a comment. I just think having the town hall also may give us some information that didn't come through on the survey, and maybe folks who never completed the survey are going to be at the town hall sharing the survey. And I didn't speak the last round, but kind of agreed with what everybody said. But I'll just mention that neutrality thing one more time, is that, sometimes it's okay to be neutral. And I think part of the neutrality is going back to what we've been saying is education. Because, I think everything is okay because I don't know how to fix it. So
Yeah.
educating our community, telling them who to call, this is what you can do. It's so much focus on what's not being done. This is what you can do. So I've always been big on education too. So just my 2 cents.
Good. And I'm going to be more noticeable of hands being raised. I'm more sensitive to it now, so I'll be looking for that and not necessarily calling on everybody. But let's move on. I mean, I think we'll use a quick survey monkey, and maybe other committees will look at it and say, hey, we want to ask the same, we want to ask questions too, or something like that. But get it going, get us to use it, get more community engagement. I don't want to offend anybody, but I'm going to move on to the next topic. We're running a little bit behind. Survey town hall. These are just some thoughts. We're not going to spend a lot of time on this. Josh and I interacted. We'll do a PR release. We'll include in the weekly emails probably 2 or 3 weeks or more ahead of time. Just, hey, reminder, once we set that date. We'll post on the communication boards on the Parkway. Again, none of these cost really that much money. We'll count on count on the press to help us support this. And, we might ask for, Amy to bring it up at a board meeting, or somebody to say, hey, reminder that, there's a town hall this whenever. So, but we could skip to the next topic, which is more important. How to measure integrity. This is a question that came up with the board meeting. It was a positive question. I'd love to get more board engagement and more questions asked or more challenges on the data or the conclusions. But it was one question that was asked about how to measure integrity, and I would broaden that to say, how are we going to measure any of our values that we're going to include in our future plans going forward? So not just integrity. So I feel like we owed the board a committee discussion and a recommendation. And again, raise your hand if you have some thoughts on this, the versus calling everybody. Looks like Miss Values herself, Helen, has some comments.
Well, yeah, sometimes I think Miss Values should have, looked at this before she presented the values. But you can't, you can't always measure values numerically. Okay. That's we know that on a scale of 0 to whatever, you can't measure numerically. And I know that the board member who asked that question, Mr. Parks, I know he's very into very objective. What's the numbers, that kind of thing. So I thought about it, and you can go online and look at how to measure integrity. Is how someone, if they're dependable, if they keep their commitments, that kind of thing, being open and honest, and all that kind of intertwines with all of our other values, actually. So I think we have to put some thought into how we'd answer that question. Sustainability, just off the top of my head, and I have a TENS unit going on right now, so my brain is not functioning properly. But sustainability, how do we measure sustainability? Well, I thought, bulkhead management, that kind of thing could be thrown into drainage, sustainability,
Recycling.
Pardon me?
Recycling.
So I think we really have an opportunity now to look at maybe getting back and, coming up with some pieces there, but you can't give it a number, I don't think.
Yeah. Wes, you have your hand up?
Yes. Integrity is one of those odd things that, I forget which justice of the Supreme Court said it. He said he couldn't define pornography, but he knew it when he saw it. Mm. And it sort of falls into that kind of a bucket, I think. I think that, you see that there was concern in the survey, because I think there's been some, over the years that I've owned in the Pines, the last 5 years, there's been some issues, that have occurred in that time. I mean, I think those issues were, the direct result of Slobodan Trendic being elected. some years ago. And I think that, I don't know that measuring integrity is as important as the board understanding that this is a very important factor for our people, and recognize, I think the board introspectively has to recognize that there's been some problems in the past. I think we've done a lot, with the new board members compared to the, what was going on some years ago. I think if you had a survey then, does the board have integrity versus a survey now, there'd be marked differences between how people view the board. But there's still been some issues. This election thing has just been a stinking disaster for us in terms of PR and in terms of faith, having faith in the board and the board's decisions. So, I think that I don't think it has anything to do with the survey directly, although it may have, because I think we were in this controversy when we were getting the results. But I don't know that it's as important to come up with an object measurement, because I don't know how you measure. Yeah, you can put some, you can do it things, say a survey about an individual person. Does that person meet their commitments? Is that person open, and honest about board issues? You could do a checklist like that, but I think it's almost more of an impression than it is a measurable factor.
Yeah.
I agree. I think it's subjective.
Mm-hmm.
Well, anybody else? Any thoughts?
And maybe that's part of a self-evaluation, I mean, board members should self-evaluate and look at themselves and maybe look at each other, but yes, it's a subjective measure, and my opinion.
Yeah, I almost have the opposite point of view, that it can be measured, and it would be something. And I reached out to two people, and again, I take it from a corporate standpoint, not from a homeowners association, but I reached out to two people that work at one at Hershey and one at the last company I worked for, which is Dawn Foods, which is about a $2 billion bakery company. I'm like, do companies measure values? And if so, how do they do that? And the answer was yes, most companies do measure whether the consumers feel they're demonstrating their corporate values. And, it was two women, both of their suggestions were you can ask something like, is the current leadership of Ocean Pines, how would you rate the current leadership of Ocean Pines in demonstrating the following core values? Now, you might need a benchmark to start out, but then you can see whether it's improving or not. But that's one possibility of measuring whether leadership is demonstrating the core values of Ocean Pines. So there is a way to do it. A lot of companies do it, or their board of directors, and a lot of it might be, again, something that could be done within the board, but I don't know that I want to do it individually, but there is ways to measure it. And it could be done on an annual basis. Are we making progress against, integrity, and those other values that would come up. So,
it would be the community.
Yeah. Yeah, much like we did on our survey. Again, we can do an annual customer satisfaction survey to see if it's getting better, because we have that benchmark. We could do an annual, how we doing against, these. Again, I think it might appeal to the board member that's analytical like I am, but there is a way to do it. So,
and we have to establish criteria then.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, but go ahead, Helen, or I'm sorry, Becky.
So I'm reading online here, and this is interesting. Okay. In ethics, when discussing behavior and morality, an individual is said to possess the virtue of integrity. if the individual's actions are based upon an internally consistent framework of principles. An individual value system provides a framework within which the individual acts in ways that are consistent and expected. Integrity can be seen as the state or condition of having such a framework and acting congruently within that given framework. So if the framework is the values that we have on the survey, and an individual or a group or a committee or a board are acting according to the values that the community holds near and dear or respects, then one would say the board would have the board, the individual, the committee, they would say that they are indeed have integrity.
That makes sense.
So you can measure it, but what is crucial in the survey or the questioning of it, or however we're going to put it, whether it's through a satisfaction survey, it has to be based on a framework.
Yeah.
And we've got the framework started in the analysis, in the results of the survey. So we ask questions based on those values that the community has ranked as important to them.
Yep.
And then we reflect it back on, we send that out to the community and we say, do you feel your homeowner's situation has responded A, B, C, D, E, F, G?
Yeah.
You can either say it this year in relation to the budget, in relation to a certain issue. And that's different than disagreeing with an issue.
Yeah.
You know, and that's part of the education. You might disagree with the way an issue is handled, but that doesn't mean the board did not act, or the board or committee or person did or did not act with integrity. So according to that little Yahoo search, I guess you can measure it.
Yeah.
Well, and if you establish, and if obviously establishing core values is part of this whole process. So
Yes.
Yes. I mean, that kind of just did it in a nutshell.
Yeah.
And if you reflect, if some, like, for example, if a homeowners association reflects back on an individual committee or a board that they don't feel that this is a situational analysis that supports the values of the community, then you have a basis to say, moving forward, we either have to correct this problem or change this problem.
Yeah.
You know, but right now, the people, the members of the community need to have feedback into that process.
Yeah. But was Doug Park's question more to do with the board as an entity or integrity as individuals?
I tried to look up the specific question. I think it was just broad. I can go back to the notes. I was actually trying to look at the press releases, which was captured in there, but it was really just, I was really pushing for, hey, any questions, any input, and he said it very. I take things positively, and it was just like, hey, just something for the committee to think about. How would you measure integrity in the future? It was really just, and it didn't say board, it didn't say community, it wasn't specific. It just, how would you measure it?
I interpreted.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I interpret his question more on a satisfaction survey level. And that's where with Helen's background and knowing quality assurance and all the marketing people that are on right now, how do you evaluate quality assurance? That's kind of how I interpreted it, as his question was more a satisfaction issue, and integrity and values becomes part of that. It's like a sub part of that. It can be included in the questions, but it is more like, if you had a complaint, was it answered appropriately or quickly, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And I think that's what it should be. I don't think it should be about individuals.
No, yeah, definitely not.
And I think when I was saying measure integrity, of course, I think like an engineer, so I'm thinking of objective versus subjective.
Yeah.
Measurements of integrity. I mean, look, I think your definition was perfectly on, Becky, which was, acting, within a core set of principles, and think about it in the terms of politics. Okay, I find most politicians having zero integrity. Okay, and so and here's a good example. A party's reaction to a certain event, okay, is different whether the person who was in the target was the same party or the opposite party. Okay, if they're the opposite party, they do the same thing as their own party does, and it's the opposite party, it's terribly critical, it's awful, and it's their party, it's good. Well, there's a lot of people that are members of that party that would say, well, they're acting with integrity because their core set of values is to stick it to the other side. But yet, if your core set of values is to be honest, and if something's wrong, it's wrong, regardless of whose side does it, that's a different view, and you're going to have a different subjective view as to whether that person has integrity or not. So I think that's what I was pointing out, is that I think it's a subjective, it's hard to measure it objectively, but we certainly can measure it subjectively.
Yeah, and it's something that, going back to what Becky, thanks for looking that up and all the open discussion here. And again, before I forget, any other thoughts you have after this meeting, whether it's Amy, Josh, anybody on this committee, just send them over. It doesn't have to be, discussed right here. It's not, we don't have a gun in our head to make a decision right this minute, but on any of these topics that we came up, survey town hall, how to measure integrity, please do that. I think, again, to the point where I was going to say is, this won't be activated until next fiscal year. So the first year might be establishing what the benchmark is. How does the current leadership demonstrate these? So we'll figure that out and have some more discussions about that going forward. Next topic, we're running a little bit late here, and I like to start meetings on time and end meetings on time. But next discussion is basically, did we miss anything in the situation analysis? I know I sent a pretty big deck out. I probably put in myself 20, 30 hours putting that together. But to me, it was making, I tried to come up with, it ended up being 9 conclusions and recommendations at that. But we might not have time to hear from everybody right now. I have some thoughts. So if you go to the next slide, Josh. So when we looked at this, and I always talk about the 4 C's, 5 C's, 6 C's, and being C for category, C for community. I would say C for consumers, which I would say are the property owner surveys. We cover, and C for culture. We covered culture. One thought I had was competition, and whether we look at close HOAs, and that would probably be River Run and maybe Glen Riddle. And then just building on that, one of the things, again, Helen really helped me, as did Becky on some of the recommendations and data analysis. But it'll be interesting to me to look at what other HOAs, how they spend their money, as an example. And like, if we found out and we were able to get what our other category is, which I'll follow up with Steve and Julia with Amy's help, trying to get more details on what's in that other category. But what's our percent spending like versus other HOAs? Are we disproportionate in one area versus others? And if somebody doesn't have police and fire, then we take that out and we demonstrate it. But that was one of the things that I had. There was another one in there that I had. I have some thoughts of some things that were missing. I think, Becky, to your point about sustainability in my analysis ended up being part in a big way of values that we need to incorporate, but maybe not enough of it didn't come into to play enough. And part of that is just looking at the amount of waterfront that we have, and how important global warming is, and we're going to get hit with a nor'easter this weekend, and there's just different things with what if what if our waterways became completely polluted? What would that do to our property values? And making sure we're doing more and leading in sustainability as an example. So we're not going to have time to get into this, but I want you to look at the deck that was sent out and maybe get back to me by the end of next Friday with any thoughts or recommendations. And then we'll make those additions to that deck and send that out again. So you have 2 times. And the second time ideally is more for making it clear, making it look better and things like that. So again, we're running out of time here, but I'll leave it. Unfortunately, we didn't get to this. And those of you particularly that have been very engaged with it, please, take a look at that situation analysis assessment and see what you have, again, including Josh or Amy. I welcome your input on things that we should have considered, or maybe I don't agree with your conclusion here, or maybe, maybe the implication should read this. So rather than having you keep over past 10:30, we'll leave it at that. Let's go to the next slide, Josh. Some really good discussion though, which is great about this committee. Again, one of the requirements is any public comments. I think we have the press on, but any questions or comments from outside this committee? Okay, how about internally? Any thoughts or comments? Again, I'm sure we're going to start to lose people at 10:30. Go to the next slide, Josh. Which is basically just a reminder that next week or our next meeting is the 24th at 9 a.m. Who wants to have it? I'll do a raise of hands, but now I don't see everybody. There you go. Raise of hands for virtual only.
Bernie, while you're looking at that, I have a conflict that day, so I will be MIA regardless of how you do it virtual hybrid.
Yeah, I do too. I'm going to be on an airplane. I don't know whether the onboard Wi-Fi will let me even commit, but I'm landing like at 10 after 10 in the morning, so it's going to be tough to be for the whole meeting, unfortunately.
Can't you change your flight, Wes? I'm just kidding.
I couldn't get out. I wanted to get out Wednesday night, but I'm coming back from New Orleans to Baltimore, and there's just virtually nothing.
Well, we'll look at a different time then. We'll look at a different day and time, and we'll work towards that, because I hate to lose you too. It's 25% of the people that are more than 25% of the committee. So we'll look at changing that time. But I did, again, voting virtual or hybrid. Who wants to do virtual only?
Or hybrid.
I can do hybrid.
I think we'll do hybrid. I was concerned, frankly, about COVID, and I think it'll be, the rates are starting to come down. So we'll do it. We'll have to reserve the boardroom again. Hopefully it's available and go from there. But anybody that needs to drop off, thanks for joining. Thanks for all your interaction. Anybody else wants to stay on, we could stay on if Josh allows us to stay on. Thanks, Rob. Yeah. Thanks, Jenny.
Bye. I have to go.
Okay. Bye-bye. Any other just general comments, open discussion, anything? I just wish we would have more time to do that.
What do you think about members of our committee visiting other committees or being representatives to other committees that they might be interested in, and so that there's a connection between strategic and another committee?
I think it's a great idea.
Like Jenny's got the communication things going on, and we have Rob, who's into telecommunications, and that connection bodes well with the fact that our residents are tech savvy for the most part, and that we also need broadband expansion in this area. And let's say, like, I visit the Racket Center often. I could hook up with the Racket Center committee, and then Amy, are you continuing in that? Yeah. And then, so I feel like the center of the wheel and the tire, I feel like we need spokes.
I think it's a great idea. And I reached out to the budget committee because I knew myself that was, and I could take that one on myself because I knew that's going to be critical, aligning budgeting framework and how you think about things in the future. So there might be some that maybe don't make sense, or maybe they do, but I think the more awareness that we can build and more without the committees. So why don't you and I take a look at the committees and make sure we have the key ones covered, and not necessarily, and we'll ask other people to maybe get involved or attend other meetings if I'm sure they'd be open to it. Having us represent.
Have we shared, is there, I know the community survey has been shared, but I mean, to the specific community committee chairs, and then they can see exactly what's in that survey that's of interest to their committee. And my husband's on marine activities, so I could certainly, have him push some buttons, maybe share some information.
I think this would be a really good topic to add to the agenda for the next meeting, because I think it would generate some really good thought. And I think Helen just brought up a really good thought that triggered me, and that was timing. So if we all volunteer as a strategic member, committee member, and visit another committee to create connection, that's really the purpose here, is that we're creating connection. We want to do it in a timely fashion, and we all want to be doing it within the same framework. Meaning that we're not there as a strategic person to tell them what to do, right? We want to kind of like know what our roles are and responsibilities are in that. So that we don't create a problem, an unintended consequence. So that's a good agenda item. That's
a great agenda item. Thank you. And again, to my knowledge, it was shared. I had to send it to Colette, who sent it to Larry, who sent it to the executive council. I attended the executive council meeting. But again, Amy was there, and it's like you have 5 minutes, 10 minutes to talk about it. So, I mean, everybody had their own stuff to talk about. So I wouldn't say it's totally ingrained. And again, we have additional data that we've created now that they haven't seen yet. And Amy, I'm going to follow up with you on that. We presented the board top line. We dug into a few other things. With everything that's going on, it's not we don't have to rush to share this more detailed dive that we've done on the survey, looking at different demographics and things like that. But at some point, I'm going to forward it to you I wanted to wait till this meeting to see if there's anything else we want to look at, other deep dives before we finalize it. But we do have to share it with the board and potentially the executive council again. But great topic, Becky. Thank you.
Okay. Stay warm, everybody. Get your shovels out.
Are we going to get a foot of snow or not? I want it. I don't think so.
Okay.
We just got the weather briefing
from
Worcester County, and it's 8 to 12 right now.
Ooh, I know. I'm so confused. Some people say it's going to snow like crazy outside. It's beautiful today. I don't know what to think.
Before the storm, Becky.
Okay. Well, I'm going with the experienced people that have been here.
Helen, I have one for you. What? So, Amy, just for your background, Helen did a lot of the work on the values and making a recommendation, and then we included it in the survey. So she owned that. Other people on the committee have owned different aspects of it, but transparency was such a big issue across the board, and it's a subset of integrity, I believe. So. I don't know that we should add a sixth value, but I think it's almost like integrity / transparency, almost as a value, or making sure that people understand transparency is a part of integrity. But I didn't know if you have any thoughts on that, since you did a lot of the upfront work. I mean, some companies have 14 values, but I know we went back and forth whether to include transparency early on in the survey, and we did not. We only included the 5, and all 5 came back really strong. On a separate issue, though, when he asked about issues, transparency was up there. So any thoughts, Helen?
Are you asking me?
Yeah, Helen, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Me, Ellen?
Yeah.
You know, transparency is such a big buzzword nowadays, isn't it? You know, we hear it all the time. So I don't know whether, are you asking then to add it as another core value consideration?
I just was looking for your initial thoughts, because again, as I was looking at the data and looking at what the issues were, transparency was one.
Right.
In reality, integrity includes transparency, but
Right.
you know, it's sort of in the definition.
Right.
I'm bigger on, like, you don't want to. We talked about measuring values. I think one of the bigger issues is going to be, how do you bring these values to life? That's going to be a lot of work.
Well, that's what I was thinking. One of the things that I would do maybe before the next meeting, I was going to go back and look at those values and look at how they're measured. You know, get a little more information there, see if I can come up with something. Whether and we did go round and round about transparency and decided, since it's you know, blended in there with the integrity. But
So-
however, it was a separate question on our survey, was it not?
Right.
Transparency.
Right.
You know?
So if the survey is the evidence that's driving whether you should or shouldn't, and the expressed values there, then you should.
Yeah.
How you, as Bernie says, how do you make that come alive? Or how you translate that? So like is going to be how you want to put it together in the questions. The questions that we're going to ask. Because there's probably going to be overlapping questions that would be integrity as well as transparency questions.
Right.
Yeah. So Helen, I guess to ask it differently, we did a survey. All 5 values came out very strong on separate sets of questions in different ways. Transparency came up as a huge issue, which is a separate value. Does the committee recommend that we include transparency as the 6th value based on the feedback that we got? And that's something we're not deciding today. We don't have a quorum, but it's something for us to think about. We'll be on the next meeting. Okay.
Something to consider, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, that would make it 6 values. That's not huge.
No.
It's not 14. It was reflected very highly in the survey. So I think it's something to consider, and we can discuss it at the next meeting, but I'll do a little research.
Yeah. Okay. Josh or Amy, any Josh first? Thanks for driving this. Thanks for, one of these days I'll learn how to do it myself. Again, I thought I was going to have to do it today, so I was going to practice based on the board meeting, but then that changed. Any final comments from your end?
No, not specifically. I am curious to see what kind of responses we do when we do some kind of mini surveys and the weekly e-blast and things like that. That'll be interesting, and maybe one of the topics, you know, the board could decide this, but we've been talking about the electronic signs. That could be something we could get data on.
That's a great one. Yeah. Because you hear some rumblings on social media, but it would be good to have the community. I know Jenny did a lot of work on that when she's in the communications committee, but yeah, that would be, and in the word cloud that came up, that came up, you know, as it wasn't one of the biggest issues, but it came up as, you know, some negativity there towards the signs. But yeah, we don't know for sure. We don't know how the community feels about that. But that's a perfect example how people come up with ideas, and not to disrespect Jenny because I love her to death and she's done so much, but somebody comes up with and this is a bad example, but I sort of brought it up, I think, at the committee meetings, at the executive council meeting, is like, for example, somebody comes up with an idea that then gets budgeted, then gets implemented, and it was a single person's idea or a committee idea, not something the community really agreed with. And we spend money against it, and then we don't know if we're getting a good ROI, and it just gets lost as another thing that happened, you know. And it should really be what the committee wants, not, you know. So I think that the boards are a great one. I will tell you that I'm not sure. I think there's so many issues related to it, and I think I looked at the cost. If I was at every board meeting, I'd say, what's the ROI on that? Yeah, there's cost saving, but is it going to take you 6 years to get the return? And how does the community feel about that? There's lighting issues, there's a whole bunch of other things, but that's a great suggestion, Josh, to ask about that down the road before the board makes a decision on that. Thanks for bringing that up. And again, thanks for all your help. And I'll work with you on the timing when we want to release our first mini survey. We should wait a week or a couple weeks before the budgeting process is done before we ask, but we'll ask about the ideal time for a meeting. Amy, any final thoughts as your first meeting? I don't want to put you on the spot before on different opinions, but any thoughts or final words from our board liaison?
I think you're bringing up a lot of good points with the transparency. One thing I heard Wes said that stuck with me as a board member is the homeowner's faith in the board's decisions. And I think that goes back to transparency. Yeah. And it goes back to making sure that board members are listening to the community members. And one great way to do that is to listen to these survey results. Yeah. So I agree. I think the transparency is important to the community, and I also think it's a very important value. The community wants to know how these decisions are being made, and they want to have faith that the right decisions are being made.
Yeah. Very good. Well, with that, thank you, Amy. Thanks for mentioning that, and thanks for everybody's involvement. And stay warm, get your shovels out, or schedule the snow plows. I guess I wasn't even aware. I mean, I hear the rumblings, but I guess we're gonna get some snow. So
are they expecting a bunch down there? Because I'm up in Westminster, Maryland, so just below the Pennsylvania line, and I thought the forecast was we're gonna get some, but it's gonna be like an inch maybe. Is it expecting more down there?
Yeah, I guess so.
If you're on active weather, we'll get anywhere from 3 inches to 18 inches.
So there you go. Great.
That covers it,
I wish I could be that accurate in my job.
Hey, just one other side, since you guys are on and don't have anything else to do, I guess. There was a question asked, which I have not brought up because it's just like an off-the-cuff question, and it sort of ties into safety. And the other thought I had was, I think, Becky, you always make me think of things. So this combination, I'm rambling on now, I've had too much coffee, but this idea of we have an older population that is pretty tech savvy according to ability, and 98% was filled out online, despite them being older. So, but at the same time, the one question we ask is, it's kind of funny. Are you aware of disaster or emergency plans in Ocean Pines?
I was thinking of that. Go ahead.
It was nobody is aware of them.
Yeah.
So it's just something that at some point I need to build that into a recommendation that going forward we should probably have some disaster drills, or particularly with people that are 70 to 90 years old, that might be living by themselves. I use the example of interviewing a blind gentleman that wanted to complete the survey but couldn't do it. But we need to make sure people are aware of what happens when there's a disaster. If somebody comes and says evacuate, you have to evacuate. If you do have to evacuate, how are you going to evacuate?
Right. I think that's a great agenda item to discuss, actually, because I think that we need a framework within the community that allows residents to connect, communicate, and care for each other.
Yeah.
We have a very caring and compassionate community that's involved in multiple social services support systems, which is just absolutely wonderful. But we need to create the connection between us so that in the event of an emergency, we're there for each other.
Yeah.
I would like to see that disaster plan. Yeah.
It was just it was one of those odd questions that we kept in there that somebody brought up as an issue in the SWOT analysis is, hey, we live in this beautiful resort area, we're by water. But what happens when a hurricane hits? Is everybody aware of that, and what they're supposed to do and how they do it? I mean, I've lived in other parts of the country where they've had, tornado practices and things like that. So it's just something, it wasn't meant to be, it's not I'll call it a strategic imperative, but it is something that we need to get better at and make sure people are aware of it in our communicating plans. So,
well, your comment is so timely. We may or may not be faced with a blizzard here.
Yeah.
And we have individuals that are homebound here.
Yeah, it's just something I thought of that I need to figure out how to. It wasn't like one of the top 12 conclusions, but it ties into safety, it ties into age of our population, it ties into a bunch of other things. And don't ever forget your thought about caring, because somehow we have to build into that giving back and helping others that are, less fortunate, and make sure those systems are in place. So anyway, with that, I hope you guys survive the blizzard.
I hope we get one. Well, for me anyway.